Hello, Jon and Jenn. Welcome to the Accordis podcast of Grow Healthy, Help People. I'm so glad to talk with you guys today. I know you're calling or we're talking from Tennessee to Boston, but your story is awesome. And the organization, Zach's Bridge, that you have set up is making an impact and it's a big story. So tell us some more of your story. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, what prompted you guys to start Zach's Bridge. I know it's not an easy story to tell, but I'd love to hear that story because so much of the time, a nonprofit or a ministry has started to solve a big need that meets people in time of crisis. So tell us a little bit of the story of Zach's Bridge, where you're from, and kind of the story that led up to you starting the organization.
Well, Shay, thanks for having us on the podcast. It's our
Yeah.
honor to be here. We started Zach's Bridge launched in 2023. Unfortunately, it came out of just the ultimate loss in our lives. Our son Zach was diagnosed with a form of cancer, bone cancer, called
Mm,
osteosarcoma at the
mm,
start of 2021, and really just treatments are just dated and didn't work. And without getting into too much detail, we unfortunately lost Zach. He was 16 years old
mm.
in early November of 2021. He battled for 10 and a half months. And amazing kid, really starting to come into his own. And he's our only child. So we wanted to honor him and help people however we could. So when we thought about what do we want to do, we knew there were lots of things that are out there for childhood cancer. There's so much research and so much, activity in so many areas. But we experienced something when Zach was sick, where when we were told there's nothing more that could be done. We looked for people that had gone through that and had faced that, not to give up hope, but to know what was going to happen and understand and talk about things that parents should never have to talk about, things like
Mm.
palliative care and hospice and tissue donation and how do you plan your child's funeral. And we wanted to have those connections at a one-to-one level,
Yeah.
and we couldn't find those people, right?
Mm.
And that carried over into bereavement, where there's lots of bereavement programs, but many of them have limits on how often you can talk or to somebody or when they can start. And we
Yeah.
wanted to have one-to-one connections with people where it wasn't just a random person all the time. And so we saw this huge gap. Right. And nobody wanted to do anything here. So we decided this is what we're going to do. We're going to bridge that gap. That's why we're called Zach's Bridge,
Okay.
and form an organization that delivers one-to-one peer support for families facing late stage and bereavement from pediatric cancer.
Hmm. Wow. Impactful. That's a hard story of why you have started the organization, but I'm glad you have because there's others that are starting today, walking that journey, and you're going to be the resource for them. Jen, can I ask you a bit of a personal question? I'd love to know a little bit about Zach. Tell us a little bit more about him, and I want to just honor him in this conversation because he's what prompted this whole organization and what you guys are doing now.
Well, Zach was a very unique kid.
Yeah.
Um, he had a wonderful sense of humor. He was incredibly sarcastic, like his mom and dad. He is our only. And Zach told it like it was. Zach had social and emotional challenges, which I think were something that he always had to struggle with, but they also gave him superpowers.
Okay.
So I like to talk about Zach's first two questions when we told him he had cancer. His first question was, "Can I swear now?" And again, he was 15 when he was diagnosed, so he said
Sure.
yes, and he swore a blue streak. And there's a plaque in his room that says maybe swearing will help. And then he
Mm.
would go to clinic and swear at the top of his lungs. And when we got to a bereavement group after he passed away, we met another mom who said, "I remember your son from clinic." And we both went, "Oh God!" And it actually had nothing to do with Zach's propensity for sounding like a longshoreman. It was about he had a prosthetic because he had his leg amputated during his cancer journey.
Okay.
And his second question, because again, Zach was very about what he could get, was,
Hmm.
"Do I still have limits on screen time?" And thank God we said, "No, you don't," because getting through 12, 13-hour chemo days without a screen would have been
Impossible.
torturous. And
Yeah.
he was able to go in. He wanted to be a YouTuber at times when he grew up. And so he said, "Well, we have to be in the chair by this time." Because, John, do you remember what was the guy he really liked that he watched him play video games was doing a live stream? Or
Okay.
he wanted to watch Dude Perfect, or he watched a lot
Tomcat.
of
His
Nerf
guy's name is
videos.
Tomcat on YouTube.
Tomcat,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay.
That's right. But Zach took his cancer in stride, which was amazing because he was the same kid who could say, you would think a hangnail was the end of the world for him.
Mm.
but he dealt with having his leg amputated. He decided it was the year that the Paralympics were really starting to be a big deal, and so he decided he was going to be a Paralympic swimmer. He had
Mm.
no athletic ability; that was not his thing. But there had been all these ads with this very cute blonde double amputee swimmer that started at
Hmm.
the Super Bowl, who actually happened to be a client at the prosthetist that we went to. So there was a big
Okay.
picture of her. And so he was like, well, I'm going to do that. And he said to both of us all the time, you got to get the cancer card. You got to play the cancer card. We went to a Red Sox game at one point. We're having trouble finding parking. And he sticks his head out the window. And at that point, he was bald from chemo. He's holding his
Uh-huh.
handicap placard and he says, I have cancer. Can we park here?
Oh, great.
That was Zach in a nutshell.
Hmm.
Hey, Shay, can I just share a little bit more also
I want to hear it.
pre-cancer about him overall? He's just a wonderful kid, but yeah, he had his share of challenges. He loved things like horses and dogs and video games and fishing and
Supercars.
supercars. He was just obsessed with all those things. And
Okay.
while sometimes his social and emotional challenges made it hard for him to pay attention, he just had this ability to have hyper focus on the things that he loved, and he became an expert in so many of them. And he was really coming into his own, and he just really, is starting to make a really good group of friends, and
Hmm.
that's when cancer started, and we just miss him every day.
Hmm. Yeah, I can't imagine that. That's a tough journey you guys are walking down the road. So let's talk more about what you guys do at Zach's Bridge. So a family gets a one sentence from a doctor that changes their world. When do you guys engage? How would they engage with you? How do you walk with them and have that one-to-one care as they walk that journey? Tell me more about how you actually operate as a nonprofit.
Jen, do you want to take that?
No, you could take. I'll chime in
So,
when necessary.
there's a whole range of peer support, and we mean parent to parent, right? For
Mhm.
people in this journey, right? There's about 16,000 new cases of pediatric cancer, kids under 20 every single year in the
Okay.
United States, and
Okay.
about 15% of those kids will unfortunately pass away. That's a great improvement than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but it's
Okay.
still absolutely devastating.
Hmm.
And for families that are entering that late stage, when you've been told there's nothing more you can do for your child, that's where compassion and connection is needed and matters the most. And there's nothing,
Okay.
right? Because people don't know what to do or say, so they disappear, right? And as
Hmm.
amazing as doctors and therapists and friends and family and all the people that surround you can be, if you haven't walked a mile in these shoes, you don't know what to do or say.
Yeah.
And that's where we jump in, right? If we get connected with a parent or a caregiver directly or from by a social worker or another
Yeah.
nonprofit that works in the space, what we do is we match that parent or caregiver up with a trained, experienced peer, someone who has a lived experience,
Hmm.
has gone through this, and can just be there
Hmm.
and listen and understand. It's so isolating and complex and confusing. And when at that point in time, when you're about to lose your
Yeah.
child, which is the
Your
worst
love.
thing
Yeah.
that can possibly happen, having somebody who says, I see you, I feel you, I've got you, I've been there, it's okay, can
Yeah.
make all the difference in the world, right?
Hmm.
And that's where we jump in. Now, sometimes we don't we're not able to connect with families and parents until after a child passes, and that's okay too. But in that same case, everything's different, right? Everything
Yeah.
changes, and everything is just finding someone who could be a friend and listen
Yeah.
is so incredibly important. And so that's what we do. We match people up, and you can have one conversation, you can have one a week, whatever you need.
Yeah.
And we're fundamentally changing how peer support works for families in those late stages.
Wow. So it sounds like it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 process, but it is a connection and a resource and a place the family who's actively losing their child or has already lost their child can go and just talk. I'm sure you guys have done that a bit. Jen, do you want to tell me, not specifics, obviously, but about a family you've kind of walked along with through that hard journey? Like, tell me how does that work? How are you engaging with them? What are things that you found to be helpful as you're talking with those families?
So I have one family or one mom I've been working with for over a year at this point.
Mhm.
Her son is still alive. He's actually on
Okay.
his second cancer, which is actually the same kind of cancer that Zach has. He got it as a result of treatment from his first cancer as a younger child.
Okay.
And we, the the majority of our relationship is via text. And we
Okay.
always tell our parents and caregivers are our support seekers who work with a peer mentor who is trained by Bridge. And we
Mhm.
always tell our support seekers, however you want to communicate, whatever the frequency is,
Yeah.
whatever the method is. So it can be a phone call, it can be on Zoom or FaceTime, it can be via text. It's really at the need of the support seeker. Um,
Okay.
as peer mentors, our peer mentors will go and will check on their support seekers if they haven't heard from them after a little bit of time. But
Yeah.
depending on what the need is, so this family, sometimes I will hear from this mom frequently if
Mhm.
her son is having some acute issues or if he's about to go for scans. In the
Yeah.
childhood cancer world, there's a term called scanxiety, and it's not just the childhood cancer world, but we didn't really learn this term until we were in this space.
Yeah.
When you are going through a journey like this, your child is scanned to check on progress of treatment all the time, and
Mm.
every time you go through that process of sitting in a waiting room while your child is scanned to see if the treatment's working, if the cancer
Yeah.
has spread, you're just, as a parent, you're imagining the worst because the sky's already falling. How much more is gonna drop? And so
Yeah.
I often hear from her when she's literally sitting in the waiting room and
Mm.
waiting for her son to come out, waiting for the doctor to come out with the results. Sometimes it's she just needs to vent about what's going on in her life because
Yeah.
yes, this is the overarching thing, but in this case, they're in a blended family of 6 kids. Her mom just had a stroke. She has 2 grandchildren. She's running her own business. And those things don't stop when you have a child with cancer. And so
Yeah.
sometimes she just needs to talk to someone who had to juggle all of those things. And a lot of the times what we do as peer mentors and is to sit in silence and just say, I get it.
Yeah.
Because as a parent who's gone through this journey, we have a secret handshake. May we never teach it to you, but it allows us to connect with a family, with a parent or caregiver who's gone through this or is going through it in a really meaningful and impactful way. Even if the cancer is not the same, the child's age is not the same or gender, they live in a totally different place, they have a very different situation, but
Yeah.
they've heard the same words we have, and that bonds us in a way that allows us to be there for them.
That's great. I love that. So, John, tell me a little bit about where you think Bridge will be in 5 years. Where do you guys hope and dream that the future will take you, the organization, and the impact you're having today?
We went into an area where there was nothing intentionally because we wanted to
Yeah.
make a difference in our lifetimes. And that was very intentional, right? Because there are tons of people doing amazing things in research and treatment and survivorship and many structured programs around bereavement. We wanted to fill this gap in a meaningful way. And it's taken a little bit of time to get there, but we're really starting to take off. And in 5 years, I would hope that we can serve a much greater percentage of the people that are going through what we
Yeah.
did. Right now we're serving, less than 1% of the population, but maybe in a few years, of the people that have lost a child or in bereavement, maybe we can serve 10, 15, 20% of that. I can tell you that virtually everybody who has lost a child to pediatric cancer needs a friend and a
Yeah.
peer in this, but it's also not the right thing for everybody. But if we can be
Sure.
helping 20% of the, I'll say the
Population.
addressable market in five
Yeah.
years, that would be amazing.
Yeah. You mentioned a minute ago, you guys started the organization. I'm sure you've had a little bit of this feeling of we started it to have an impact. We've started it because we want to meet this need. Wait a second. We also started an organization that has a tax ID number and we take donations and we got to send out receipts and all the things that kind of pile up on your plate. John or Jen, either of you guys, tell me how is that going as you've realized we didn't intend to start a business, but in some ways a nonprofit is an organization that has to run, has to have revenue and cover expenses and bank accounts and tax ID and all of those things. How's that going? How's that process been?
Yeah, that's definitely I think my question to answer, right? I mean, we knew that when we started, right? Because I
Yeah.
think you have to approach this as a business with structure and strategy and operational excellence, right, in so
Yeah.
many areas. But neither one of us had started a small business in any fashion overall. So going through that means that we need to
Well,
surround
actually, I did run
ourselves.
a small business.
Well,
You
you helped
did.
run a small business, right?
We
No, I started a small
Oh,
business.
that's true, right? Yes,
There
20
you
years ago,
I
go.
was
The
a,
yes.
truth comes
man,
out. So Jen, tell us how has this
Right.
been similar to that small
Shay,
business that you ran?
we have been together for over almost 25 years.
John, you might be the
Many years
doghouse
ago.
right now.
No, he's not. And
That's
actually,
great.
before I get to that, I will say that we actually really complement each other well. Our strengths,
Yeah.
as professionals. John is, John has many years of marketing and partnerships, and I've been a hospital administrator for the most part. I'm now a pediatric palliative care social worker, so we complement each other well. About 23 years ago, I actually had started a small business. I was a personal chef for several
Okay.
years. Um, and at the time, I really hated running the business. I loved doing the cooking,
Yeah.
um, and it really taught me a lot, because you can have a passion and you can want to take something that you're passionate about and do it, but you really have to be thoughtful about it and know the things that need to happen to have it be successful and sustaining. And I think
Yeah.
in this case, we've actually done a pretty good job of laying the
Good.
groundwork for it to be a stable organization. I have then also run small and large medical practices since then, which is different than running a nonprofit, but
Mhm.
our skills and our skill sets really complement each other, and we're able to do what needs to be done, which is not always the easiest thing when doing something that's coming out of your passion and coming out of honoring your child.
Yeah.
Right. And just to go back to, Jen, thank you for reminding me. I did forget about that, but no, I remember that very well because I helped a little bit with that. But Jen was great at what she was doing at that point, but didn't really like running the small business part. So when we
Yeah.
got into Zaxbridge, we knew we needed to do all these things, and it really
Yeah.
starts with, um, you know, early on, it's cobbling things together for free, right? Asking
Yeah.
people for help and all that. And now that we've been at it for a little while, it's surrounding yourself with um, the right experts to get advice where you don't know something, because you
Yeah.
don't want to make a grave, decision that can hamper the structure of your business, right? Or your finances or your operations. So we're very lucky to have a lot, an amazing board and advisors and lots of help along the way. But this is really where we are right now. We're trying to increase our donations and grants, to increase our operating budget, to be able to do more things, pay more people, and figure all that out. So a lot of it's finding talent outside of our walls, right? Jen and I can't do
Yeah.
this on our own. So finding good people to help with everything from taxes to legal stuff to website to design, it's super important, and it's really hard. And sometimes you have to churn through the right people until you find that match that can work really well with you.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense. As I mentioned earlier to you guys, who presents this podcast, that's what we saw. We saw many years ago, I served on many different boards, and every organization had the same challenges, which is the John and the Jen say, we want to go solve this problem and meet the need and help people. And then, John, you and Jen also, both of you guys have some business background. A lot of nonprofit leaders have none. And they say, what do we need to do? And that you say, the 1023, you got to file to the IRS. And they're like, what has to go to who? And you start the process of getting 501c3s approved by the IRS, and then receiving donations and bank accounts and all the tax ID numbers, all that follows along with that. That just becomes quite cumbersome. Fortis, the company that I work with, we say, give us the back office stuff. Give us the stuff that we can take off your plate so you guys can go run the mission and meet the mission and the vision of the organization. So Jen, I got one more question for you as we wrap up. What is something that you would share with a family that has just received this diagnosis or gotten the phone call from the clinic or the doctor, what is something you can say to encourage them, even if they don't reach out to Zaxbridge? What's an encouraging word for them, and then maybe how they can connect with Zaxbridge if they or they know of someone that has a need and is walking this journey that you guys have walked?
You don't have to be alone in this. Connection is so much a part of a pediatric cancer journey, and it doesn't change the outcome, but it can make it slightly more doable on a daily basis.
Then if someone knows of someone or they've received, their family, their child has received this diagnosis, what are ways that they can reach out to Zaxbridge? Is there a geographic limiter in any way, shape, or form? Is it all in the US or is it worldwide? Tell us more about how they can reach out to get plugged into Zaxbridge.
Jon, you want to take that one, or you want?
Sure. So, I mean, anybody can visit our website, www.zaxbridge.org. Right. If you misspell it with a K, that's fine too. You'll end up in the same place. And we are national. We serve people all throughout the United States. We do have some international support as well. We also have Spanish translator on staff. So if you're a native Spanish speaker and want to engage, we can support that as well. So our website's the best place to start. And you can, friends and family, if you know somebody, you can connect with us and we can see if that's a good fit. If you're a parent going through it, you can reach out. If you're a social worker or a nonprofit or a medical professional, anybody can go there and just hit request a peer and we'll jump in and try to help you out as quickly as possible.
Jon and Jenn, thank you so much for being on the Grow Healthy, Help People podcast today. What you're doing matters. I want to encourage you. It's a hard journey that you've walked, but you pouring into others that are walking that same journey is incredible work. So thank you for doing that work. We'll put the link to your website in the show notes here. And for those of you watching from wherever you are in the world, we encourage you, if there's a mission that you want to accomplish, do like Jon and Jenn. Just jump in, figure it out, and press forward with that. Have a good day.
Thanks for having us, Shae.
Thank you.